All right, so here we are. Got block number 2, beautiful little hummingbird. I have black thread in still from my last stitch, so I think I'll do the eye. Even though it's on top of everything, it doesn't interfere with the layering, where we should do this blue, then this blue, then the green. Maybe white would be first, but since I have black in and the eye is a standalone, I'm going to go ahead with that. And I am using a utility stitch menu number 2 blanket stitch, which is number 4. So stitch number is 2-04, and it's the smaller blanket stitch. Whoop. Dip me needle down there. It takes 1 stitch in and 1 stitch forward, which is a little shorter than the other stitch we are using. Okay, so here we are, hummingbird, gonna do the layers. Gonna just peel back that green. Okay, so the hummingbird, block number 2. As you can see here, it's been all basted down with that very long open blanket stitch and using those gorgeous Alana wools, which of course I did on the back wing here. The hummingbird is somewhat simpler in some of its edge finishes. The wings and main part of the body are all finished with a blanket stitch. So there's multiple blanket stitches. Maybe you already have a favorite one. If you don't have a favorite one, maybe you'll find one along the way. I feel that maybe something not too large. Now we've got 2 edges, so what I like to do when I'm going to test a stitch, just gonna fold the edge over so that I'm working on 2 layers. So I'm going to give myself an edge and test my stitch. I've got the blanket stitch in the menu on my luminaire is menu number 2-04 blanket stitch. It's gonna test it on here. Let's have a look, see. Single, in and out, single, in and out. Okay, that's the type of one I want. But I think I'm going to need a bigger width because I'd like to see the blanket stitch here. All right. I have a width right now 4, and I'm going to increase the length to a 4 as well. I kind of like the blockiness of that. Okay. So I do like the size and shape of that. And I'm using the Invisafill and the bobbin, and I'm using the Elegance on the top. These are the same threads and colors recommended by the pattern, but I'm very carefully using them. So I found the blanket stitch that I'm going to use. Using blanket stitch 2-04. I'm going to start with a couple of stitches in place. I've increased the width to 4, and I've got a 3.5 length. So it's going left, right to 4 mils and forward 3.5. Take your time. If you need to pivot, pivoting should be done on the curves when your needle's on the far right, especially on an outside curve like this. Remember, we're sewing with thread that, for all intents and purposes, was meant to be used. Right. Okay, so I'm just off that tip there a wee bit. What do I do? So I'm just going to turn my hand wheel backwards. And I'm just going to scooch this forward just ever so gently and then drop the needle in the point so that when I turn to pivot here, the stitch comes right in and out at the point of that wing. And then I'm just going to move forward. Curve here. There we go. Nicely around that corner. And I can stitch in place and pull the tail to the back. Just do a couple stitches in place. And that can go to the back. Here's our finish. There's our beginning. And I'll just pull those tails to the back and tie them. On this block, I don't have stabilizer. The blanket stitch is not a very intense stitch, and with the firmness of the wool, especially on 2 layers, I think we're good without. But absolutely, you can put one in there. I pulled those tails to the back, and what I might do here, I've got the bobbin thread and the upper thread. You can barely see, of course, the bobbin thread is so fine, but you could potentially tie these two together or just put a knot in the variegated. Just a wee bit more, right? 3.5 hitch, but if you go around again, it becomes a surgeon's knot. They tend to hold nicely. There we go. And maybe we trim that off just a little more so they're not in the way for later. Same with this stitch here. Or I could show you a second one, which is just, I pull the thread through a loop once and twice. I just hold as I put that down. So create a loop, pass the tail through it once, around again twice, and then just going to move that to the base of the thread there, my finger on it, and pull. What that does is it creates a nice big knot down there. And we'll just trim that. There we go. So you tend to layer your appliques like we did when we basted. Belly of the hummingbird, I'm going to keep the same blanket stitch I had previously. This is the Eleganza 1011, a beautiful pearly green. Okay, everyone. So you can see I've got blanket stitch all the way around the hummingbird in that lovely green that matches the wool. And then on the tail, down the two sides here, we have this color couching this color down. And I think I'm going to approach this just a wee bit differently, because I have green in and on the needle. I think that what I'm going to do is I'm going to do just a straight stitch actually around the tail. Probably a slightly longer length, 3.5. And there's some detail in the tail feathers there that we're going to kind of emphasize. Just a few lines up there, so as to get them in there rather straightish. Just going to draw those in. There are various finish lengths in the picture, you can see. Again, I like odd numbers. So there's 6 showing in the picture, but I'm going to go with just 5. And they start at the end here, but they go up into the tail. What I'm going to try around the side here, maybe a heavier green actually. And what I'm going to do, let's try a triple stitch at 4.0 down the sides, just to give that a little oompa, a little more depth. So I'll let you know that I'm doing a triple stitch down the edge here, just to give it some bulk. The triple stitch is a length of 4.0, left-right shift of plus 3.5 to get it in the center, and I'm just going to decrease the tension a weird bit, and let's see how that's going to look here. So what I think I'll do is I'm going to embellish this triple stitch later with color 148. Because in theory, the directions say this stitch is couched down by the other one. So I'm going to give a fairly heavy stitch there. It looks pretty good. The end of the tail feathers, though, appears to be just a regular straight stitch. So I'm going to switch to a regular straight stitch, because what I'm going to do is also, when I get to that little tail embellishment, one more stitch, I think. There we are. Then I'm just going to straight stitch up the tail here. And that right now, it's just a length of 2.5. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, it's a bit dainty. And then I think I'm going to increase it to 3.5 on the way back, and I'm going to stitch right over those. Here, just a little bit. I'm going to turn the hand wheel backwards just a smidge, get the needle out, and drop that where I need to be. And then I'm going to travel here. And I'm going to keep things consistent. I'm going back to 2.5. So up the tail feather. Remember, we don't want to finish in the same length. They aren't even. So that was 2.5. And I'm going to switch to 3.5 to come back out. Okay, and up the side, remember over here was triple stitch. I'm going to switch back into triple stitch. And then we'll just take my thread puller, take all those to the back. Okay, here we are. Everything's tidied up. I've got the heavy sides here. Instructions had us couching the green down with this color. So I'm going to put this on the machine, and then I'm going to just do a little zigzag or something. All right, so here we are. I think that I'm going to embellish that triple stitch with just a wee little zigzag. So I've just picked from menu number 1 the zigzag number 10, but I've made it a width of 1.5 and a length of 3.0, so it's going to be kind of long and kind of narrow. So it looks a little bit like we coached the green down. And I'm just wondering, rather than stop starting, which is the weak point of almost all of these, I think I am going to just switch out to a little straight stitch. I'm going to make that 3.0 long, and I'm just going to go along the tail just to kind of emphasize that blue on top of that green I did earlier. You'll have a little bit of a blue-green mix. And then, I like it. Then I'm going to go back to that zigzag. Quite like that. Looks a bit like couching without couching. Then I'll just pull my tails to the back and that portion will be done. There we have it. Basics of the edge finishing for our little hummingbird. Now the addition of the beak, the little flower that's hanging out of the beak, and there's some embellishment on the wing, and there's a little bit of texture here down his throat. For the film buffs, you know that we used to play that game, Continuity Errors, and you may have noticed that at different points I was using this clear applique foot, this open toe foot on my Move It, and now I have the metallic open toe foot. All of these might be put into use while you're stitching out the hummingbird or any of the other birds as we move along. Whichever one I feel is going to be most helpful. I prefer a metal foot, as I find sometimes if you set these up and down too firmly, you can actually crack the toes off. There's not a lot holding them just here. There's that little divot there even to accommodate wider zigzag. So I've switched over to the metal version. I might switch over to the Move It foot depending on where I'm going and how fast I need to get there, how much control, and which stitches, because some of the stitches on the machine will not function with the Move It foot. And what I'm about to do, I'm not traveling very much. In the pattern, in the throat area here, is a series of French knots. And those French knots are to add some texture, and it's using the lovely pearl cotton, the very subtle, soft cream variegated. Same one that was used on the belly to blanket stitch. Very, very soft, very subtle, very pretty. So I've got that stitch up on my machine. My very fancy sample piece. I've got it folded into when I'm testing edges like this, where I'll be doing edge stitching on single to a double layer of wool. different stitches depending on whether I'm doing single layer or double layer. And what I tried here is double layer. It's the breast of the hummingbird is 2 layers of wool. And the little star stitch from menu number 3 under the utility stitches on my luminaire. It's in menu number 3 and it's stitch number 6. And what I've done is I've turned on the single repeat so that it's just going to do one and stop. And then what I think I'm going to do is I'm just going to move over and I'm going to leave this little travel stitch. Rather than doing a knot going in and a knot coming out and then cutting those, I am going to leave them as just extra texture on the hummingbird's chest, because the knots themselves create a little bit of trauma for the thread. And of course, remember, I'm using pearl cotton like this, except this time the lovely pearly cream one. And it's truly not meant to be run through the machine, even though I am. And it's strong enough thread for hand stitching, absolutely. It just not necessarily happy. And let's see, got bottom thread, lovely blue that matches the background wool, pearl cotton in that large needle. And then here's our little hummingbird. And I might use one of the markers to help me. Wait, just gonna check one more time the star. I might do a knot, couple stitches in place, and then to start, and then we'll leave a tail. There's a travel, and then we can do another one. But of course, I don't want straight lines in the chest area, so just to the back there. Give myself a refresher on the size that that's going to be. It's a bit bigger than a hand French knot would be, but then we would need less of them down the throat into that chest area. Could change the width a bit. I believe I did in my test earlier. Made it a little bit smaller than that one up there. Maybe we could vary the width in this. There's so many choices. Too many choices. And for heavy stitches like that, I've now added a couple layers of stabilizer. I'm specifically using an OESD product, Ultra Clean and Tear. And then, as you can see on the pattern, some fairly heavy through here, and then fades off to not much in around here. So I'm just going to draw a bit of a line there. Let me know when to stop. Just don't get involved in stitching and then you forget things like where to stop. So maybe that's where I'll start. Just clearing And I think I'll just start with one kind of down just below that line. Couple stitches in place. And then we'll go ahead with the actual stitching. Okay, just from experience, I'm pretty sure that's the end of that stitch. And then it's going to want to stitch forward. So I'm just going to turn this and I'm going to go over there and maybe make another one. Almost a little easier to see on the back. But it's just, I'll pull the tails to the back shortly. You can just see a little bit of beautiful texture with that pearl cotton in that beautiful pearl finish. There we go. Some beautiful French knots covering the throat of that hummingbird. All right, our next section is the blue wing on the hummingbird, the lighter blue wing, and it uses this beautiful variegated. Okay, so I've gone ahead, made a few marks on the wing where that's sort of, they're really like giant daisy chains in the form of a flower. There's a really large one down here, and then three smaller ones up the wing. And then I put some dots in where the French knots are. They're in yellow. So start with the variegated, and I found some stitches that I'd like to try. So I found a flower in the decorative stitch menu. Menu number 7, single repeat of 708. And just start that up here in the tip of the sort of 3 lazy daisy stitches on the wing there. So, look, of course, it'll look much nicer when we pull the tails to the back. So another one there. There, just pull those tails out of the way. They're pretty sweet. Need a larger one here if I'm going to mimic the pattern. So that same stitch, (7-08), and then I'm going to increase the width to 13.7 and the length 14.9. Yeah, then I could just drop that here in this area. It's a little larger than these. Leave myself a good tail to pull to the back. See it there. Just here. Pull all these to the back, and then I think I'll attack those yellow French dots. Gathered French dots on the wing. Beautiful yellow. Now I'm going to go back to menu 3, stitch number 6, single repeat. But I'm going to reduce the length of width a little bit. 4.5, 2.0. 4.5 is the width, 2.0 is the length. I'm going to loosen the tension just a little bit. Leave myself a tail to tie off with. Let's give that a try, shall we? See now. I'll just pull those threads to the back, tie them off, and I have yellow French knots in the little daisy flowers. And it's pretty sweet. Those little French knots tidied up. A little tiny daisy chain and a slightly larger daisy chain there. It looks very similar to the picture. All right, so we'll do the stem. What I've got going on here is a bit of a combination stitch. Always make sure that you change direction from the center line. I'm keeping that curve. So I've added a straight stitch and a leaf stitch, creating a combination stitch. Very similar to the hand stitch. And our next bit will be the tassel and the little cap. And just a point of reference, the leaf stitch here, that is out of menu 10 in the character decorative stitch menu, 10.20. One single repeat, and then a chunk of straight stitches to extend the line. And I love the 3 sets. Our eyes tend to like 3, 5, 7, 9 rather than 2, 4, 6, 8, and managed to pull that. And always remember, do a test so you can figure out, like here, how long that repeat is and whether you need to add anything in between. All right, well, final steps from the hummingbird. I'm going to stitch in a beak. We've got that lovely stem, and down here at the end is a tassel. There is a way to make a small tassel by machine, but I think this one deserves a beautiful long tassel. So I'm going to walk you through my version of the tassel. Things I need: large needle with, I don't know, 15 inches doubled up of this beautiful pearl cotton color 1026. It's that gorgeous variegated in our kits. And something we all have in the instructions is called the winding board, but pretty sure most of us have a package of needles. I think this will probably be about the right size for what we're going to do today. So I'm going to turn this side and just going to wrap just loosely wrap around as much thread as you think you need for your little tassel. Okay, so there we are. And if your hands don't work very well, you could actually use these 2 tails as a tie, and that would hold them together a little bit for you. At least keep it from unraveling while we're working on it. So there we go. Got that tied off on the end here. Then what I'm going to do with this needle and thread is I'm just going to use the needle to slide under those stitches. And I think I'm going to go to the other end. And what we'll do is just tie all of those wraps together with this. I'm going to use a surgeon's knot, which means passing a tail through twice. What happens with this one is when you pull down on it, doesn't slide undone again. It holds a little better. So it's like the half hitch, but you go over and under, over and under a couple times, and then pull that down. Snug that up nice and tight. And then we're just going to slide that off a cardboard or the needle package that we have. And so, pretty nice bit of tassel. The instructions show you folding it over and doing it again, but I've made a fairly short tassel to begin with. And because I've already got this here on a needle, I'm just going to anchor it into the area I marked. For a tassel. And I'm just going to come back up here. So I'd like that to hold while I'm stitching it. And we could do this part by machine for you die-hard machine girls. Okay, so what I'm also going to do is I'm going to come up sort of a little under and beside. And then I'm going to go over all of it and then kind of under from the side. Come up again. Just trying to pinch the top of the tassel together, because our next step will be to satin stitch over that. So I'm just managing the top and the bulb here. There we go. So I've taken a couple stitches up at the end there to hold that in place, and then I'm going to do a machine satin stitch over that end. Just gonna take that tail, cut the needle off, and just knot that so it doesn't come loose. Just leave that as is. There we go. So now I have that beautiful thread anchored in place. And then what I'm going to do here, because it is anchored while we're working here, I'm going to put the scissors up in the middle and cut all those loops off and those spare little bits. And if you worry about those moving around while you're working on it, you can just finger press in place. You could put a piece of tape over top of that so it doesn't move. And I'm going to stitch it, then I'll trim this nice and tidy. What I've got in that brown variegated, it's still in there from when I created the stem, the vine. What I'm going to do is just going to take a regular little straight stitch here. And this is where I said you could manage the upper by machine as well. Just a couple straight stitches across there. We'll push that bulk down. Create a bit of a brown base on the top. Now, we could just carry on that way till that's covered nicely in the brown thread and creates a beautiful cap. I'm gonna just lift the needle up. I'm not going to cut that thread. Hopefully it hasn't begun to shred there. And I'm gonna pick a zigzag, just your basic menu one. I'm going to make it, well, we think I'm going to start at about a three wide and a length of, how about 0.6 to start. Maybe loosen the upper tension a bit. And now I'm going to create a bit of a cap, which will join the end of the stem to the top of the tassel there. Got it. There we go. And do about 3 stitches that way. I'm going to go to 3.5. 2 more or 3 more stitches. 0.4. 2 or 3 stitches. 4.5. A couple more stitches. 5. And as long as the zigzag is clearing the tassel, it's going to cover that top. And that's what I'm hoping for. So if your number needs to change for the width, it is what it is. So now I'm at the widest, which is 5. Now it also might, it's building some bulk there, so I might have to lift the foot a little bit. Make sure that your machine is still moving. Just got one thread kind of sneaking out here. Just gonna pull it in. There we go. So we're getting quite a nice little cap. Make it a little wider. Let's see if one of my zigzags. Yeah. Zigzag 1. 10 goes a little wider, so I'm going to go up to 6 mils. Try a stitch or 2 more. 6.5. Damage your threads. Seven. That's the widest this machine can do. Okay, so I'm going to do a couple stitches of 7 there. And then I'm going to turn around and I'm going to lift things and I'm going to shift things. And I can get a wider stitch by moving this and bringing it down. And I'm going to shift. And now I make my way back to the top. Take a couple stitches, then decrease your width. Decrease the width. Take a couple more stitches. And this also looks like a padded satin stitch. Nice 3D effect. Now the bulk is a challenge for the machine. If you're getting no movement, lovely. I think I'm done. That out the back. Giving myself a nice tail to anchor with. Yeah. Lovely. Now what you can do is just comb all these down. This is our other thread. We'll take the other brown thread here. We'll take that to the back. Time. So you can just comb these down and then with a good sharp pair of scissors, trim the ends if you want a tighter, cleaner edge. It's gonna come in here. Give my tassel a little haircut. Beautiful. All right. Final step for the hummingbird is the beak. It's an elongated fly stitch in the hand instructions, which is actually very long stitches. I think that I'm going to define the beak and get a good adhesion to that stabilizer by just using a multi-step zigzag, kind of narrow, 2.5 for the moment, just as a base here. It's kind of up the middle. Of course, this beak is quite small. So after a bit, the multi-step is not going to be our friend. So I'm going to switch out to a regular zigzag at a 1.5 width and length. To where that, if the tip will be. There we go, just to help identify our area. Then I'm going to switch to a regular old straight stitch, about 2.5 long, and I'm going to just stitch back to the beginning. Now I've put a slight curve in my beak. It's the way I drew it originally. stitch there, I think. And if you can't see it cleanly on the screen, I have drawn it on background. Also, this might help you on screen. All right, so I have a nice beak lined out there. And those of you who machine embroider will recognize what I've done here as underlay. So I'm going to satin stitch back. I'm going to start with a width here of 1 and a length of about 0.5 or 6. You can always go back over it if it's gappy. I'm going to try a 0.6 here for length and 1 for width. And what we're going to do is, as the zigzag hits each side, as we're about to not hit it, then we will increase our width to 1.5 so that each stitch is hitting both sides. Hit a 2. .5. Just hitting each side. Then looks like I need to go to 3 now. Maybe 3.5. Maybe a 4 for the final few here. Now I see some bobbin thread coming up there, so put down, let the needle out, and I'm going to try to go back here a little bit. Loosen the upper tension just a little more. And I'm looking to fill this. There we go. And decreasing width as we're expanding past the original parameters. I feel like the tip of the beak filled in nicely earlier. Maybe I'll go right to the end. 1.5 for a couple stitches. And 1.0 for the final ones. And out. Leave myself a good tail on both ends that I'll feed to the back in time. And there we have our finished hummingbird. Yay! It's beautiful, if I do say so myself. Okay, well, that's the completion of block number 2, Hummingbird. We'll see you for our next bird.